Greetings, loved ones. You know, children between the ages of 0 and 6 years old are continuously learning and developing socially and emotionally. For an appropriate development, a child needs the love and care from both parents. And in the case of families who are experiencing domestic violence, the social and emotional development in children in such families is negatively affected. The psychological wellness of the child is affected at an early age and later in life. Today we're going to talk about these effects of domestic violence on children. So to help get our messages out, because our goal is that those who are suffering violence will recognize they're suffering violence and know how to leave. And those who are not suffering violence will know how to recognize those who are suffering violence. So subscribe to our YouTube channel so you won't miss a single episode. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hit that like button, and please share these messages with others, because you never know, just by doing so, you could save a life. Domestic violence has been an issue in many societies in the world, but usually it's always been considered as a family matter. It's only recently that things have begun to change and legal proceedings can be taken on an offender. I'll give you an example. In Honduras, if a man were to hit me, I could actually file assault charges. But if my husband were to hit me, the law is just a law of prevention of violence, and so therefore they could only hold him for 24 hours to calm the violence, and then he would have community service and classes and stuff like that instead of being charged with assault. So since the women's movements in the 1970s, domestic violence has begun in different places to become a legal matter that calls for police courts and judicial process intervention. So when one is talking about domestic violence, what comes in mind is violence between partners. And in most cases, women are on the receiving end and are subjected to physical, psychological, and emotional violence. However, the scope of domestic violence extends far beyond this belief of just the man and the wife to include child abuse and the effects that such abuse can have on a child. Family violence is a term that can be used to describe the various forms of violence that happen within a family setup. A family is a sociological unit which includes parents and children. The most common types of violence within the family are spousal abuse and child abuse. And violence in this sense may include slaps, pushes, sexual abuse, battering, and use of abusive words. A research study conducted in the United States has shown that each year more than 3.3 million children suffer from domestic violence. The effect is mostly psychological and emotional, but it is sometimes physical. Children's social and emotional development is profoundly affected by exposure to any kind of violence, and especially domestic violence. Between the ages of birth to 6 years, this child, as we said, is constantly learning and developing their emotional and social health and character. Parents have the burden of developing a healthy emotional and social environment for that child. The type of environment that the child grows in affects his social and emotional development. So socialization factors dominate the child's character building as well as personality. And the family is the first socialization environment for the child. What the child observes and experiences is registered in its mind and goes a long way in forming their attitude, their behaviors, and their feelings about different issues. If the family is undergoing domestic violence, the child's mind will be exposed to violence and will form their perception and attitudes towards life based on these experiences. For example, if a child is brought up in a family where the husband dominates everyone and is abusive, this behavior becomes accepted as normal. A male child from such a home may develop a belief that women are inferior to men and thus they should be abused and dominated. At this tender age, a child is not able to differentiate what is good and what is wrong, but learns from what surrounds them. Richterink, Feinsilber, and Hessler in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence observed that early exposure of children to domestic violence influences their emotion regulation abilities. To evaluate the effect, the trio used the baseline vagal tone method as the measuring parameter unit. They observed that the effects have a long-lasting effect in a child's life and affects their social and emotional health. The research by the trio went further and evaluated other effects that domestic violence has on the trajectory of children's psychological regulatory abilities. They observed that in preschool, children who come from families experiencing domestic violence have low concentration in class and are more likely to be violent in class. Expressing one's emotions is an important aspect of human growth and development. In domestically violent homes, violence may sometimes erupt while one of the parents is expressing his or her emotions, like anger. The child is learning from this behavior. His mind will convince him or her that violence is a means for someone to express their anger. In the future, the child decides not to discuss their views and feelings and results in emotionally troubled children. They become unsure as to when and how to express their feelings and fear that if they do, they might be subjected to violence. Good communication is an element of how well a person can express themselves. If a young child cannot express their feelings, it will affect them in the future. A research study done by Joseph Govinder Bagwanji in 2006 showed that during episodes of violence, children are often left to wonder which side they should take. The study states that girls cried openly in the presence of their parents during the violence, but boys, they cried secretly when they reflected on what was happening between their parents. The children in the research said that they felt like hitting the abusing parent, but instead ended up in this other form of response. Excuse me 1 second here. We'll get back to that. From a different angle, the child might create negative emotions with one parent, which affects their relationship in the future. In extreme conditions, children from these homes show similar characteristics like those seen in children living in areas of war. Their condition can be termed as post-traumatic stress. In the case of spousal violence, one parent will be the offender and the other one the victim. In an ideal situation, the child needs the love of both parents. But in this case, the child will lack what they need because the offender is not able to provide the needed emotional support to the child, and the victim's heart and mind is stressed and cannot give proper care to the child. Eventually, the child will suffer. Since the brain of a child is young and willing to learn, the child looks for love in other places like television or in gangs and friends and other manners other than seeking it in the family. The child is left hanging on the balance not to know whether to stay or move with the offended parent when the victim decides to leave. So they're ambivalent, like do they stay with the father who's aggressive? Do they stay with the mother? Their loyalties, they're very confused about their loyalties. And the child's psychological, social, and emotional stability is profoundly affected. The child is exposed to making lifetime decisions at a young age. We all need to be on the lookout for children who are suffering violence. The question is not if you will encounter a victim of violence. The question before God is what will you do when you encounter them? You could be the person who saves a life. You are called. We are all called to be champions for justice, and those who suffer violence need to know that those who love them and those who don't even know them will step out and reach out to them and give them the courage and the help they need to leave before it's too late. This series is dedicated in honor of Gabby Petito, a bright young woman whom the world has lost because of gender violence. We would like you to please check out and support the foundation her family created in her honor at GabbyPetitoFoundation.org. If you are a victim of violence, please listen to me. I want you to know this. You are valued, you are loved, you are intelligent, you are beautiful. God does not want you to live and suffer in violence. He wants you to live free from violence in peace and tranquility. There is a way out, and it's not your fault. Abuse, someone who is abusing you is not loving you. If they say they love you on this side and they abuse you on this side, it is a lie, and they will never change. So if you're a victim of violence, please find someone to reach out to and keep reaching out until you can find someone who will help you. And if you're in danger, dial 911 for help. So help us get these messages out. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, hit that like button, and please share these messages with others because you never know. Just by doing so, you could save a life. Tomorrow, we're going to continue to discuss the effects of domestic violence on children. So until then, God bless you.